For my informative speech, I have chosen to talk about Charles Manson. Charles Manson was an American criminal who was the leader of a murderous campaign with his followers, the Manson family, that would make him one of the most infamous figures in criminal history. Notorious for his connection to the brutal slayings of pregnant actress Sharon Tate and other Hollywood residents, Manson received the death penalty in 1971, a sentence that was commuted to life in prison the following year. A little bit about his early life was that he was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, to Kathleen Maddox, a 16-year-old girl who was both an alcoholic and a prostitute. She later married William Manson, but the marriage ended quickly and Charles was placed in a boys' school at age 12. Rejected in his attempts to return to his mother, Charles was soon living on the streets and getting by through petty crime. Over the next 20 years, Manson spent time in and out of reform schools and prisons for various crimes. He was released from prison on March 21, 1967, and moved to San Francisco. The Manson family cult was a group of around 100 followers of Manson who shared his passion for an unconventional lifestyle and habitual use of hallucinogenic drugs such as LSD and magic mushrooms. The Manson family eventually moved from San Francisco to a deserted ranch in the San Fernando Valley. Manson's followers also included a small, hardcore unit of impressionable young girls. They began to believe without question that Manson's claims that he was Jesus and his prophecies of a race war. Manson was influenced not only by drugs, but by artworks and music of the time, most noticeably the Beatles song Helter Skelter from their 1968 White Album. Helter Skelter, the true story of the Manson murders, was later the title of a best-selling book about Manson and his crimes written by Vincent Bugliosi. Paul McCartney has said that the playground slide in Helter Skelter was a metaphor for the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. Manson, however, interpreted the lyrics of Helter Skelter as incitation to begin a race war. He turned to the album and lyrics to justify his scheme and guide his followers to murder. Manson had a strong belief and interest in the notion of Armageddon from the Book of Revelations and also explored the teachings of Scientology and more obscure cult churches, such as the Church of the Final Judgment. In many ways, Manson reflected personality traits and obsessions that were associated with gurus of cult, quasi-religious groups that began to emerge in the 1960s. He was pathologically deluded into believing that he was the harbinger of doom regarding the planet's future. Before Manson's famous murderous spree, Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys had allowed Manson and several members of his family to stay at his home after picking up 2 female members of the family who had been hitchhiking. It was through this association that Manson got the opportunity to audition for Terry Melcher, son of Doris Day, which was also a friend of the popular 1960s band The Beach Boys, who was living at Polanski's house at the time. Melcher wasn't interested in signing a contract with Manson. Manson allegedly did record some music at Dennis's brother Brian Wilson's home studio. The Beach Boys released a song written by Manson entitled Cease to Exist, which was later renamed Never Learn Not to Love on their 1969 album. The Manson family, including Manson and his young, loyal disciples, is thought to have carried out some 35 killings. Most of their cases were never tried, in part for lack of evidence. The perpetrators had also already been sentenced to life for the killings of the 1969 Sharon Tate, his partner, Coffee Beans heiress Abigail Folger, and celebrity hairstylist Jay Sebring, and 2 more victims on August 10th. Wealthy supermarket executive Lino LaBianca and his wife, Rosemary. In August of 1969, Manson gathered a group of his most loyal followers to carry out his massacre among Hollywood's elite and the most beautiful people. The first of Manson's victims was murdered at the home Polanski had rented, located at 10050 Cielo Drive in Benedict Canyon, an area just north of Beverly Hills. Polanski was away in London shooting a film, and the 4 victims had just returned home from dinner at the time of the murder. While Manson himself took no part in the actual killings, he directed 4 of his most obedient followers, Charles Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian, to the address and directed them to kill everyone. According to one of the family members' statements, the Polanski household had been targeted because it represented the showbiz world that had rejected Manson. Stephen Parent had been visiting his friend Garrettson when he became the Manson family's first victim. As he drove away from the house in the dark early morning hours, he was spotted by the intruders and shot dead. Kasabian was horrified by the shooting of the boy, and she remained outside to keep watch. Kasabian acted as the getaway driver and was to become the star witness during the trial. When the other three broke into the house, they herded Tate, Frykowski, Folgers, and Sebring into the living room and tied them up. Sebring was shot and brutally kicked as he tried to defend Sharon Tate. During the terrifying murder spree, both Frykowski and Folger managed to escape from the house but were chased and stabbed to death. At the trial, Kasabian described how she saw Frykowski staggering out of the house covered in blood and was horrified at the sight. She told him she was sorry, but despite her pleas to his attacker to stop, the victim was bludgeoned repeatedly. Folger escaped from the house with terrible injuries but was caught on the front lawn and stabbed 28 times. Sharon Tate, who was 8 months pregnant at the time, pleaded for the life of her unborn child. She was mercilessly stabbed in the stomach by Atkins. Kasabian told of Atkins' chilling words to Tate before she stabbed her. Quote, "Look, bitch, I have no mercy for you. You're going to die and you'd better get used to it." Unquote. This type of speech kind of sounds like there's not really any motive behind it, but they're just deranged due to the drugs and most likely the mental illness that they were suffering from at the time. Atkins then used Tate's blood to write the word pig on the front door. However, instead of this brutal massacre sating the pathological Manson, he criticized the murders for being sloppy. The following night, Manson took family members Watson, Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten to the Los Feliz address of the La Biancas, and the couple was murdered in a similarly horrifying fashion. Ironically, Manson and his family were arrested not on suspicion of the Tate and La Bianca murders, but simply on the belief that they had vandalized a portion of the Death Valley National Park while they were hiding out in the Mojave Desert. In 1969, the county sheriff had taken them into custody, not realizing that they were involved in the heinous murders. Then, a series of trials began that would take place for multiple years, which ultimately led to Charles Manson being served with the death penalty. However, in 1972, the death penalty was outlawed in California, so he remained in prison until he died in 2017.